From the Warhammer Imperium magazine, collected short stories narrated by J.H. Miniatures.
At the request of Inquisitor Draxos, children of the Wyrm, thought of the day. Ours is an eternal duty, a vigil that shall never end. Yet we bear this task willingly, for the Emperor gave us life, and we preserve his life in return. Brothers and sisters, the Star Children shall soon bless us with their holy presence. We hear them in our dreams and feel their presence in our souls. With their arrival shall a new era of glory dawn over us. Rise up, comrades, throw off the shackles of imperial oppression and embrace the one true path. Cleanse this world of its impurity. Abandon the worship of your long-dead emperor and look to the heavens for salvation.
Nefik Bar Garak, Inner Wyrm Cultist. In the bowels of a shrine world, far beyond the prying eyes of the Imperium, insurrection threatens to tear a world asunder. As Xenos cults rise from their hiding places to usurp the Imperium's servants, the talons of the Emperor strike back, determined to rid the holy world of heresy. Shield Captain Lorcan clasped the haft of his guardian spear and lowered its tip towards the onrushing mass of Xenos cultists. His Alaris Terminator armour had begun this day glistening as if fresh from the forge. Now it was encrusted with the crimson blood of the scores he had slain. His fingers closed around the trigger at the base of his weapon's long haft, and the bolt gun fitted to its tip roared, emitting a volley of explosive shells that punched through several ranks of mutant abominations before detonating in an explosion of innards and acidic alien blood. Lorcan stood in the cavernous entrance to the Imperial Shrine. From clefts and crevices in the desecrated structure's masonry, leering half-human monstrosities scrambled forth. They flailed with black-blue claws, some clutching makeshift weapons, others armed and armoured in the uniforms of Astra Militarum soldiers. Beneath his helm, the shield captain's nose wrinkled. The stench of Xenos corruption was rife. Crude murals depicting the cultists' alien overlords had been daubed over frescoes of the Emperor's triumphs. Such heresy would not go unpunished. The tide of filth rushed forward. Far too numerous to halt with bolt rounds alone, they leapt towards him, attempting to gain purchase on his blood-slick armour, claws and blades seeking the gaps between his armour plates. Lorcan shook one of his assailants free, hurling the unfortunate cultist into a stone pillar. The hissing creatures struck the stonework with enough force to break its spine. Reaching over his shoulder, the shield captain grasped another of the wretched beings and hurled it bodily to the floor. Before it could rise, the blade of the guardian spear swept down, parting the creature's bald head from its shoulders. Lorcan swung his blade again, slicing through chitin, bone and gristle without resistance. As he lurched forwards, the bones of his victim shattered beneath the tread of his Terminator armour. On an encrypted Vox channel, he could hear the static voices of his brothers. 10 Custodes had arrived on this world to purge the Xenos, 10 against a fanatical army of thousands. Lorcan had been more than satisfied with the odds. With foes pressing in on all sides, Lorcan found himself lost in a battle trance, centuries of ingrained training and muscle memory directing his every strike. His Alaris Terminator armour was like a second skin, its servo motors serving to empower his already superhuman strength. As he continued to swing his blood-slick weapon in wide, devastating arcs, his gaze fell upon a lithe female figure standing apart from her kin, observing the skirmish. She stood atop the cathedral's graffiti-encrusted pulpit, clad in a flowing robe with a stiff, gilt-trimmed collar. Her eyes flickered with the familiar blue-white glow of the warp, unmistakably a psyker. Wrenching his blade from the gut of a screeching cultist, Lorcan rushed forwards towards the slender, bald-headed psyker. Before he could reach the base of the pulpit, however, she raised a golden sceptre high and unleashed a wave of warp energy that surrounded his golden helm and penetrated his defences. He could feel the icy tendrils of her alien mind reaching into the recesses of his. His head throbbed violently under the assault, and he stumbled to one knee. A thin smile split the psyker's face, and she uttered a barked command. As Lorcan struggled to right himself and break the psychic connection, howling foes rushed across the chamber from all sides, avoiding his flailing, weakened strikes and burying him beneath a pile of clawing, grasping bodies. Meanwhile, the Psyker's probing continued, burrowing deeper into his psyche and causing his brain to swell inside his skull. The pressure continued to build as the cultists hacked at his prone form. This time, the blood that trickled down his golden armour was his own. As he wrestled to free himself from the bonds, both physical and mental, a crashing sound echoed through the cathedral's vast nave. As suddenly as he had been shackled by the Psyker's assault, he was free from her grasp once more. Beneath the mass of bodies, he sensed a new presence. The paralysing psychic presence within his mind was replaced by a familiar, nauseating sickness. To most, these feelings would have inspired further dread, yet to Lorcan they were welcome indeed. The aura of the Sisters of Silence was unmistakable. The crushing pressure released from his cranium. Lorcan rose to his feet with a mighty cry, hurling his attackers aside. The western wall of the cathedral lay broken open. Into the ragged breach surged a golden rhino transport, its flanks adorned with golden aquillas. Its assault ramp swung open, and from within strode 10 armoured female warriors, bolt guns already spitting death into the unsuspecting mutants. True to their name, the sisters remained utterly silent as they pressed forward, shoulder to shoulder, bolt guns firing perfect synchronization. Atop the pulpit, the robed Psyker clutched at her bald head, screeching unintelligible curses. Unable to draw upon the warp, panic crept across her face. With his assailants distracted by the fire of the Null Sisters, Lorcan thundered his way towards the pulpit, flagstones, rubble, and broken pews splintering beneath the weight of his armour. He lowered his shoulder and crashed into the base of the pulpit with all the force he could muster. The impact pitched the Psyker free from her position, throwing her to the ground. Above her prostrate form, the pulpit creaked as stone, wood, and metal splintered, bent, and gave way. Beneath the toppling structure, the cultist leader raised an arm reflexively, as if to ward off the falling stone. Then she was gone, her anguished cries buried beneath several tons of jagged rubble. You see, now I quite enjoyed that. That has got to be one of the best of these short stories so far. I know at the time when this was released, it tied into oh goodness, there was I think it was a box set or a book that was released about the the Guardians of the Emperor, the Adeptus Custodes, fighting a gene stealer cult on Terra. So I wouldn't be surprised if it sort of tied into that release. But yeah, just, there are little things like little semantic things, little bits of sentence structure that don't make sense. Um, like early on, it's going, parting the creature's bold head from its shoulders. Lorcan's swung his blade again, and it doesn't need to have. Yeah, it's just I don't know. I find myself sometimes as I read through these, I'll just instinctively change things to sound better. Um, he could feel the icy tendrils of her alien mind reaching into the recesses of his mind. Well, you don't need to say mind twice, do you? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but genuinely, the majority of the short stories so far have been very sort of bombastic, and then they shot to their guns and the aliens died screaming in agony. This was quite a nice one to actually get a little, I don't know, like a little context of the Sisters of Silence, a little bit of the fact that these sort of super soldiers, they are vulnerable to things, and they are vulnerable to psychic and magic powers. It was quite nice to have one of the inserted text boxes, the bit at the beginning of that from Nefik Bar Garak, just a little snapshot of the mind of the enemy, so to speak, of the Gene Stealer cult. I thought that was pretty neat. The next story, War in the Scrap Heap. This is 100% a tie-in story to the War for Octaris Kill Team box set that came out. Like the art on the page is torn directly from it. So honest to God, this next one, this is going to be pretty shameless. It'll be interesting to see with these stories if the ones that are direct product tie-ins, if A, they've been printed anywhere else, because I don't know, but also B, to see if the actual quality of the writing increases or not. But we will see. These short stories are always a real double-edged sword, because on the one hand, they're quick, they're painless, they're over before they've really started. So if they're not very good, you can just skip on right past them. However, if they are good, you feel like you want it to go on longer. Like, I want to see this battle resolve. I want to see Lorcan then go on to have a conversation with the Sisters of Science. I appreciate the irony of that. It would be in battle sign. It would be in the hand motions. Or like to see him then report on the greater sort of scale of the conflict, like the idea that they've sent 10 custodies to subjugate a planet. I find that just absolutely insane. However, it'd be interesting to actually hear about how that happened, how that worked, what caused that situation to come about. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.